Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Lowrance Training Academy. I am here with my HDS 7 carbon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use all the different sonar menus on your HDS lives and HDS carbons. Now, as you can see, we've got our sonar screen right here, just kind of your basic standard sonar. You've got your depth scale that goes down the side over here. It starts off at 0 at the top and goes to whatever range you have it set down here at the bottom. As you can see, mine starts at 0 and makes it down to 20. You have your bottom image, which the bottom's right here, and then you have your plus and minus buttons right here, which is your zoom in and zoom out, or well, your plus will zoom in, your minus button will zoom out. Now when you hit it, you're going to notice that it zooms in on the main part of the screen, but you get this little mini screen right here, which is the actual regular sonar screen, as what you would see when you zoom back out like that. And you get this little kind of shaded in area, which is the area that it's showing on the main part of the screen. Now you'll also see down here, it shows what frequency you're running in the bottom left-hand corner. And it'll also give you a number, like right here where it says 2x, that means I'm zoomed in times 2. If I zoom in again, it'll say times 3, times 4, or if I zoom all the way out, it goes away completely. Now you also have your overlays up here, like your depth and your water temperature. Now on here, you're going to see this bar that's going right across the screen. Now what that is right now is I have my lure down in the water. Now if I take my line and I lift it up, you can see how it goes up on the screen. And as I lower it back down, you can see how it lowers back down on the screen. I'm actually running 2 jigs on the one line, which is why you're seeing 2 lines. And now it's actually repeating the same image over and over, which is why it creates a straight line on the screen. So that's what your jig is going to look like. Now a lot of times you'll see your fish will actually look like these streaks that are come up as they're coming up to actually look at my jig. So you'll see them kind of all of a sudden streak up and meet up right with your jig line, as you can see right there. Now let's go ahead and get started on our menu options we've got here. Now we've got our mode, which I'm going to go into that last, so I'll get to that here in a minute. But the first option here is our range. If I click on that, you're going to see a list of ranges that I can pick between. I can drag it up and see other ranges to choose from, or I can go in here and you'll see at the bottom where I have auto and custom. Now when it has a little green corner on it, it means that that is activated. So right now, so whenever I click the auto off, I can go through and I can manually select different ranges on here. Now really what you want to do, because if you can see if I select too far down on here, it shrinks up my screen and my viewable area is much smaller. So you only want to have it set slightly deeper than what you're actually in. So right now I'm in about 16.5 feet of water, so I want to set it at the next one, which is 20. But in general, I recommend leaving it on auto. That way you can, you don't have to worry about messing with it. As the depth of your water changes, so will your unit. And so that way it always keeps the bottom right there at the bottom of your screen. Now you also have this custom button here where you can go through and you can select what your limits are. So this very top number here is your upper. So if I just wanted to see from 10 to 20, I could set the top number, my upper, to 10 and my bottom number to 20. And so then it would only show me from 10 to 20 feet on my screen. It's just a way for you to be able to customize it a little bit further. Now I'm just going to leave it where it's at. So I'm going to go back. Now my next option here is going to be our frequency. Now I am running the active imaging 3-in-1 transducer on here. So because of that, I'm only going to have the 83 and 200 in medium and high. Now the high chirp relates to the 200, my medium chirp relates to the 83. Now what the chirp is, it actually runs a whole range of frequencies. Now you can see when I click on that, my resolution got a little bit clearer on there, because instead of running just 200 kilohertz, I'm actually running 130 kilohertz all the way through 210. So it's using all 80 frequencies just to compile a much clearer, higher resolution picture, which gives you better separation of targets from each other and from the bottom. Now you'll notice that if I select it to, like, say the 83 on here, you can see how my screen gets really cluttered up. It's because it's a much lower resolution frequency on here. And if you're going to be fishing in, generally I say 100 feet or less, I recommend running either the high chirp or the 200. But if you're going to go in deeper than that, or if you're just very, very shallow water, like 5 feet or less, sometimes the medium chirp actually comes in a little bit better because the cone angle on it is actually a lot wider on the lower frequencies. So like on the 83 kilohertz, it actually has a 60-degree beam, whereas my 200 kilohertz only has a 20-degree beam. And so generally you would think, oh, well, a wider beam is going to be better. But because that wider beam picks up so much more imaging and stuff down in the water, a lot of times it'll clutter up your screen like this. But having that wider beam can be beneficial down in really shallow water because you're not able to see a very large area with only a 20-degree beam. So having that 60-degree beam will allow you to pick up a little bit better fish. And it's also kind of like, think of it as like AM or FM radio. So your FM radio, it's much better sounding, quality stations and stuff. But the broadcast towers, they don't shoot very far. Like you can only go so many miles away from that station before it starts to cut out. Well, with like AM radio, it's kind of poor resolution, not quite as clear, but they're able to broadcast, across state lines and stuff with it. Well, it kind of applies to here because we're also using sound waves. And so the lower the frequency is more like your AM radio, where it can shoot really far, which is why it's good in deep water, but it's not quite as clear. It doesn't give you as good of a resolution. And so that's why when you're in shallow water, it's best to run the higher frequency. As you can see, my picture clears up real nice, and I can see my jig coming across and the little fish arch streaks coming up. Now let's go ahead and go back. Now the next one is going to be our sensitivity setting. Now you can leave it on auto, which is where normally I recommend leaving it at, where you can actually click down here and turn auto off or turn auto on. And if it's in green on really any of these settings, if the green shows up, that means your auto mode is on, or if you're seeing orange, it means that you're in a manual mode. Now you have two ways to adjust this. You can either hit your minus buttons and you can see how it removes imaging off the screen, or I can hit my plus buttons and it adds a lot more in. Now auto uses actually a very specific algorithm to be able to use your sonar image to calculate what sensitivity level is going to be the best image quality for you depending on the conditions that you're in. And so that's why I normally recommend leaving it on auto. But if you are going to manually adjust it, I recommend only going one at a time and give it a few seconds to let it kind of recalculate itself and readjust, so that way if you go too far and jump a bunch on there, all of a sudden you'll lose all of your imaging, or it'll go it'll add too much back onto it and it just basically becomes unusable. So if you're going to do it, just do little minor settings adjustments with it. Now let's go back. Now the color line is going to be a personal preference. Again, you have this nice little slider bar here where I can lower it down, which turns everything more blue. As you can see, everything kind of turns blue on here. Or as the higher I go, everything kind of turns more yellow on it. Well, I generally recommend running just on kind of the default setting on there, which is between 74 to 76. Gives you a nice blend of all of the different color spectrums on here. But again, like I said, that's just kind of a personal preference kind of thing. Let's go back. Now we have our advanced, which will take us into the next option settings. So we'll more options. Before I do that, I'll explain the source. Now I'm running like I said, the 3-in-1 active imaging transducer, which plugs into the black port on the back of the unit. Well, you also have a blue port. Well, on these units, they are dual channel chirp processors. So your blue port is your channel 1, your black port is your channel 2. So it's very important that you have the correct source selected on these units. Now I have another video that I'm posting showing how to set your network sounder mode, because depending on whether you're on like a single source or a multi-source on it will depend on where you can set your channel. Because right now I'm on multi-source, so I am able to have an option right here where it says source. But if I was on single source, I would have to choose my channel within my frequency. So look for both of those. If you don't know how to figure out what sounder mode you're on, watch my other video that I put out on it. That'll show you how to set that up properly. But like I said, Right now, I have mine set on channel 2 because I am connected to the black port on the back of my unit with my active imaging 3-in-1 transducer. Now let's go back. Now let's go ahead and go into our advanced. Now you're going to see some options here. The first one is going to be your noise rejection. Now the unit is going to default itself to low. Now I usually recommend leaving it on low. Now you can go up and increase, but these are filters, which means that the higher you go, the more it's going to kind of filter off of your screen. Now your noise rejection is really meant more for if, let's say you have more than one unit on the boat broadcasting sonar. You can kind of get cross talk between the signals, and you'll start getting vertical lines on the screen. You can go through and you can increase your noise rejection to kind of help filter those out. The same applies as if you're getting vibrations off of your main motor or your trolling motor, or let's say there's a bunch of other boaters in the water that are also, say, fishing the same area and they're also running sonar. You can pick up the crosstalk from them as well, and so then you can go in and you can adjust it and set that level as it suits you. Now, just in general, I recommend on low. It doesn't filter out too much, but it does give me a nice clear picture. So let's go ahead and go back. Now you also have your surface clarity. It is also going to default to low, and it is also a filter. This means that if I go in and I increase it, you're going to see at the top here where it's removing all of this extra clutter out. Well, that may seem nice. You know, you may think, oh, hey, I'm going to sit on high. It removes all of that extra junk off my screen. Well, yes, it does remove it. However, you have to remember that because it's a filter, it's not just that clutter that's removing. If you also have fish up in the top area of your screen here, it's also going to remove them as well. And so that's why I don't recommend setting it too high. I would rather just set it on low right here. You get a little bit of clutter, but as you can see, my fish came right back that I can see now, which were not there before. And so again, like I said, it really depends on the conditions that you're in, the type of water. If it's really murky, dirty water, you may need to increase it a little bit. But if the water is just kind of just general average lake water, I recommend running it on low. Now let's go ahead and go back. Now we have our scroll speed, where you have the slider bar again, to where if you go up, as you can see, it increases the speed of the scroll on here. And as I go down, it slows it way down. Now, you don't want to necessarily go too high because it will distort the picture. It'll start to stretch everything out and break them up. I kind of like running ×2 because it does make my arches and items on the screen just a little bit larger. But, you know, the unit is going to default to normal, which is just kind of the average way of doing it. You know, I would recommend maybe increasing the speed while you're running across the lake to kind of keep up with yourself. But when you're just drop shot fishing, set it to normal, or maybe even drop it down a little bit. Now we also have our ping speed. Now this again is going to default to the max setting on here. I actually recommend dropping it down just a little bit, so that way it kind of helps lock on to my suspended targets a little bit better. And so, and that means not just the fish, but my jig as well. And so sometimes if like you're having an issue seeing the jig that you have in the water, it's just not really showing up, or you're not really seeing the suspended targets very well, try lowering that down just a little bit. It's just a little trick that I picked up. It does kind of help you pick up on your jig. As you can see, it's now kind of showing back up, and I'm raising it up and down. As you can see, my jig up there on the 5 foot mark kind of is going up, and as I lower it back down, you see it kind of go back down to around the 7 or 8 feet mark there. So just so, like I said, a little trick on here kind of helps it get it to show up a little bit better on your screen for both the fish and your lure. So let's go back. Now you also have this manual mode. All that does is it turns off all of your automatic modes. So like your auto sensitivity, auto range, it sets them all into a manual setting. You know, I don't really use that. I like the auto settings on here. And so I leave my manual mode off, but that's all that really is. So let's go ahead and go back. Now the last set of menus is going to be under our more options. Now if you click on it, the first option here is going to be your stop sonar. If you click on it, you're going to notice that it comes up and says stopped on the screen. Now if you're able to listen to your transducer, you would also know that the little pinging sound also stops as well. It's because it stops the transmission of your sonar signal. This can be useful, especially if you're using it up on your trolling motor and you're pulling up out of the water quite often. I like stopping it before I do, so that way when I drop it back in and then I reactivate my sonar again, it's able to then lock back onto that bottom a lot better than as if I was letting it just run out of the water and lose its depth range. Now, the next option is going to be our split. Now you have three choices here. You have your zoom, your bottom lock, and your flasher. Now what this does is if I hit my zoom, it gives me a little split screen on here, where then if I am to press my plus and minus, I can zoom in and out on one side of the screen while still being able to see a larger portion of my regular sonar image. Now you also have your bottom lock, which is a little bit of a strange option. What that does is as I zoom out, you're going to notice that it actually will make your bottom very solid. So like say if your bottom is kind of going up and down, instead of it going up and down, your bottom will stay solid and your top image will kind of go up and down. Now you're also going to notice that the depth scale on here is in reversed. Instead of being a 20 down here and a 0 at the top, you're going to notice the 0 starts down here and it starts counting upwards. What that does is it allows you to be able to see how far off the bottom various objects and structure are. I don't really use that myself too often, but it is a cool little feature they add on there. Now the last one is your flash. Now this one is going to be just kind of your standard flasher. I'm sure you guys have all seen this before. It still gives you a split where you can see your regular sonar, but it also gives you your flasher screen over on this side here. All right, now let's go ahead and go back. Now the next option is going to be our palette. Now this is all the different colors that you can pick from. As you're going to see, there's all these different options to choose from. Now there's 14 of them on here. Now my personal preference is number 13. The reason being is that it still uses the white background with all the different colors for the fish, but on the bottom, instead of being multicolored, it turns it into this nice shade of brown. That means that any fish or structure that are sitting right on the bottom, it separates them from the bottom itself. So instead of blending in and not being able to tell if that's a fish or a structure that's really sitting down there, it really makes them stand out. And so you can see those fish, especially catfish, just kind of popping out there in the different colors right on top of the bottom. Now number 14 does the same thing, but it turns it to an all blue background. But I personally prefer number 13 myself. Let's go ahead and back. Now you have your overlay down scan. Now what this does is it just overlays your down imaging on top of your 2D sonar. So you're going to notice how the bottom image changed, and this is actually my down scan picture that it's pulling up on here. I've seen in a lot of cases where when you turn on that down scan overlay, it actually just really clutters up your screen really badly, and it's really hard to tell really what's going on. And so for that very reason, I don't normally recommend doing the overlay down scan. Now, if I want to be able to see both my regular sonar and my down scan at the same time, I recommend running the down scan screen and then turning on your fish reveal feature. It is a much more usable option because it's not overlaying at the bottom and at the top here both images at the same time. If you watch my down scan or structure scan video I have out, I go into a little bit more detail on that. But again, because of that feature, I don't recommend using this one. So now you also have your temp graph. Now what this does is when you turn it on, you're going to notice that you have these numbers that show up here. These are your temperatures. You're going to get a little range, like right now mine shows 80 to 95. Now what that does is it's going to draw a line across the screen. Now let's say the temperature of the water changes as I'm moving, it's going to draw this little line kind of up and down. So then I can go back and I can just look anywhere out on my screen here and be able to tell what that temperature was at that specific point in time. Now let's turn that off there. Now the next one is our depth line. All it does is it draws a blue line right along the bottom. That's really useful if you're not using the bottom track feature like I am. But because I am, I don't need that option because I can tell the difference between the bottom and what isn't the bottom. So I'm going to turn that off. Now scrolling up here, now we have our A scope, which is our amplitude scope. Now all this really is a vertical flasher that you get on the screen here. I don't really care for this one. I feel like it just kind of uses up space on your screen that otherwise could be used for viewing your sonar. But you know, some people might like that. They might be able to see, like I said, it's kind of like a vertical flasher, so they can just quickly see where things are popping up on the screen as they're being seen. So I'm going to turn that off. Now we have our cursor mode here, where what this is it's going to default to cursor only. So what happens is if I tap on my screen, it brings up this bar across the top here. And what I can do is I can grab it and I can drag it side to side to view previous points on my sonar that I had already passed over. Now, it gives you the option to be able to select always, where it always leaves that on your screen, or you can set it to where it's always off. But I prefer cursor only because sometimes I do like going back and viewing that. And so if you do select that though, what you have to do is select back, kind of scroll down, hit back, and then hit clear cursor. That way it removes it and it puts me back into real time. So let's go back here. Now the very last option is going to be our fish ID. So let's select that there. Now what this is going to do, and this is really more for the beginner fisherman, if I select symbols, it's going to give me like little pictures of fish on the screen. Now the newer software, actually I kind of like it now, because before, whenever you turn this on, it removed everything off of your screen. So you lost all of your arches, but you could only see the little fish symbols. And that wasn't very useful because anything that it saw down in the water, it would show as a picture of a fish, as opposed to when you're viewing, you know, just the arches, you know that when you see an arch, it's an actual fish and not just maybe some trash or clutter in the water itself. Now you also have your depths, to where instead of it showing the pictures of fish, it gives you like little depth numbers right there instead. So it tells you how deep that piece of object is. Or you can select both and it does both for you. It gives you the little picture of the fish and it gives you the depth on it. Now at the very bottom here, you can select fish ID beeps, to where the unit will make like a little quiet beep at you every time it picks up one of those little fish symbols. Just kind of like a little alert to let you know that, hey, I saw a fish, look at me. And so I'm just going to set mine to off because I don't really care for that feature myself. But let's turn that off as well. All right, so that's really it for those options. So let's go ahead and go back to that mode like I mentioned before. Now when you go into mode, these are kind of standardized default settings that you can switch between for different conditions that you're in. Now the general water here, that can be used really for anything. And honestly, any of these you can use at any point in time if you know how to set up your settings on here. But the general is for 1,000 feet or less. So it's more for your, you know, kind of offshore, inshore fishing. Shallow water is designed for 60 feet or less. Your fresh is for 400 feet or less. Deep water, well, let's just pull up here. Deep water is for deeper than 1,000 feet. Slow troll is for, you know, when you're slow trolling. Fast troll is for fast trolling. Now clear water is just like your freshwater setting, except that it's really designed that it increases your sensitivity a little bit for use on just really crystal clear waters. And then you also have your ice mode. Now you're also going to notice that there's these little pencils that will sometimes show up on there. Now when you click on one that has a pencil, you get this option down here at the bottom that says reset mode. Now if I click on that, you're going to see how it reset all of those options that I just changed earlier in the video. But if what happens is, let's say I go to shallow and then I go back here. Now if I go in and I change my palette, so let's switch it back to the number 13 where it turns it brown. Now when I go back to it, you're going to see how that has that pencil there. That means that those adjustments that I've made on that mode are now saved. So if I go to, let's say I decide to go offshore and I go back to my deep water, and then the next day I go back to a shallow lake, I can just select shallow and it'll save all of those settings that I had on there previously to that individual mode. So that way I don't have to keep going back and forth and resetting up all of my settings every time I decide to change what body of water I'm going on to. Just a nice little feature that Lowrance adds to these units. All right, well that's really about it for all of the sonar settings on here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've got more videos coming out weekly, and as always, all right, well that's it for today guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it below and hit the subscribe button and the little bell. This will allow you to get notifications every time I release a new training video for your favorite Lowrance product. Also, I wanted to give you guys some really exciting news. We will have our very own website pretty soon, LowranceTrainingAcademy.com. It's going to have even more of your favorite in-depth, comprehensive training videos, so keep an eye out. Of course, I'll be sure to let you all know along the way when it'll be up and running. And don't forget, when you watch videos from Lowrance Training Academy, the difference is night and day. Alright, I'll see you all next time.